visit to the Philippines so far?
I've had a great time.
But you've been writing also along the way, right?
We were on a plane together last night from Cebu, and the plane was delayed, and Sandra's like, oh, I'm going to go eat some food, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. I was trying to write a novel. It was very serious.
And the terminal was so nice. I don't know how you did it.
Well, this is my life. Like, I'm traveling around for We Were Liars, and I'm trying to revise my new book at the same time. And so the laptop just comes out whenever I can get it out, and I try to block out the rest of the world and write.
Yeah, can you tell us about your literary influences? Who are your favorite authors and what are your favorite books?
I went to graduate school for Victorian novel. I have a PhD in 19th century English fiction. And so I always really admired, Charles Dickens and Charlotte Bronte and Emily Bronte, who comes up a lot in We Were Liars, who wrote Wuthering Heights.
Jane Austen.
And Jane Austen too, yeah. But I tend to like the later Victorians a little more. Yeah, I'll go all the way up to Edith Wharton. So I have that as a big literary influence. But I don't think you can see it on the surface of many of my books, because a lot of them also have a lot of pop culture influences as well. So Fly on the Wall is influenced by, the artists and writers of the Marvel Universe. It's about a girl who has a Spider-Man obsession and is a comic book artist and becomes a fly on the wall of the boys' locker room in her high school. So it's very much a sort of superhero fantasy / realistic fiction boy-girl kind of thing. And so I feel like almost all the time my literary influences are coming kind of high and low at the same time. And I like to mix it up that way.
What inspired or influenced you to write We Were Liars?
My grandparents on my mother's side built a little house on Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off the coast of Massachusetts in the States. It's a pretty big island. It's about 30 miles long, and it has lots of little towns in it. But they had this little house that they built, and I used to go over on the ferry boat to visit them, and I would see, it's about a 45-minute ferry boat ride, and you can see these private islands off the ferry, and you see like one beautiful house at the top of a sort of rocky island, and I would always wonder what people were doing on that island and what their lives are like. So We Were Liars is kind of my answer to that question that I had in my head since I was pretty small.
Are the characters in the book coming from anyone you know from personal experience? Do you have a family like that?
No, those are horrible people.
The grandfather and the 3 daughters?
No, those are not my people.
Just coming from your head.
My family is much nicer than that. But I did want to write about what I think is a pretty universal experience of childhood and young adulthood, which is that families fight. And some people's families fight every day. And some people's families fight once a year on Christmas. And some people's families are violent. And other people's families are fighting, very quietly in just little angry tones and glances. But I think that all kids have heard the grown-ups in their lives arguing with each other one way or another. And also, as you grow up and you're not a child anymore, but you're a teenager or a young adult, you begin to question why those grown-ups are fighting, how they're fighting, what they say, what they refuse to say, and what their values are. So I wanted to write about that moment in growing up, where you begin to think that the adults in your life are messed up, and you begin to think, I don't believe what they believe, and I don't think these are even maybe good people. And I think that's a dramatization of something that's pretty universal.
And in the book, you intersperse snippets of fairy tales. Why did you choose to insert these stories in your own story? And how should the readers read the fairy tales? We shouldn't skip it, right?
Well, there's no should. You can read them however you want. I'm happy with the book being interpreted any way anybody wants to interpret it. The fairy tales, I'm going to tell you a story. So, I grew up with a single parent family. My dad was around, but my parents divorced when I was 2. And I just lived with my mom. And it was the 70s, which tells you how old I am, which is super old. And we lived in a communal house for 5 or 6 years. And by that I mean that my mom and I each had a room in this very big house with a whole bunch of hippies, basically, who were, you know, meditating and doing yoga and smoking it up a little bit. So we actually were not in the same house the whole time. We had to move from house to house because we were not very good tenants, this big group of hippies, right? So this is relevant because I did not have a lot of furniture. My mom and I just had bedrooms, and we did not have even beds. We just had mattresses on the floor. I had toys and things like that, but I did not have, bookshelves. And one of the things that came from house to house to house with me and my mother was a box of big, beautiful, illustrated fairy tales. These were late 19th and early 20th century fairy tale collections illustrated at what's known as the golden age of British book illustration. So artists like Arthur Rackham, Kay Nielsen, Edmund Dulac. And these were, you know, the Brothers Grimm and Charles Perrault and the Arabian Nights, all these beautiful stories. So I grew up reading them. These books were so precious. If I wanted to look at them, I had to, have clean hands, and my mother would watch me while I was reading to make sure that I didn't tear the pages, and this was all very special. So it's only later in life that I thought to ask myself this question: why, when we did not have bookshelves, when we did not have bed frames, were we carting a box of 19th century fairy tales from house to house? And the reason turned out to be that these books were given to my mother by my father when they were courting. And so essentially I was being asked to, take my parents' marriage and wash my hands and then look at it. So in other words, the books were they were an endowed object, which is just a phrase that writers use sometimes, or literary critics use sometimes, to mean an object that means more than itself. It's endowed with meaning. So I wanted to write a novel where the characters were endowing a lot of objects with a lot of baggage, meaning, symbolism. So in We Were Liars, there's a whole island that is endowed, an endowed object, and there are houses, and there are bank accounts, and there's jewelry and family art, right? And all of these are weighted with this extra meaning of the grandmother's love and the grandfather's approval. The fairy tales, once I was writing about endowed objects, which for me came from carrying that box of fairy tales around through my childhood, using fairy tales to help tell my story seemed very natural to me. And I had grown up reading many, many fairy tales because we had this collection. And so I took famous fairy tales that connected to Cadence's story in We Were Liars and used them to kind of tell certain truths about the Sinclair family in the novel that Cadence herself was unable to tell directly. So the fairy tales are used to kind of reveal things that she is not yet ready to understand herself. There's a lot of stories that pit 3 sisters against one another, and I wanted to explore those.
Why did you choose to name the group of Cadence as the Liars?
Everyone is a big liar in this book. It's a book about people who are a family who is telling
not want to be
people are lying to themselves as well as to others. I think people lie for good reasons as well as for bad, right? In this book, a lot of times people are lying out of love. They're lying to protect someone's feelings. They're lying because someone might not be ready to hear what they might want to say, or because they're protecting themselves. So it doesn't mean that they're nefarious. It means that they are emotionally complicated.
The main characters in the novel write words and phrases in their hands, like mottos.
The characters in We Were Liars write mottos on their hands, and some of these are mottos that the grandfather character in the book espouses, that they don't agree with so much. They discuss those more than they do write them on their hands. Never complain, never explain, winners always sit up front. He has a bunch of mottos that are, the mottos of the big white patriarch who feels very secure in his own awesomeness and entitlement. So he has a lot of those kind of mottos about how to be a winner and how to be a strong man. And the liars begin to, the four main characters in the book begin to, figure out their own mottos, how they want to live, or at least how they want to live for the day that they have the motto written on their hands. And so some of the mottos they discuss include be a little kinder than you have to, never eat anything bigger than your ass. Some mottos, you can really live by that one.
Yellow, what's the yellow? Don't eat yellow.
Don't eat yellow snow, that's right. Yeah. Don't.
Keep that in mind.
And other more serious ones like, maybe forget my own motto. Always do what you are afraid to do, and do not accept an evil you cannot change.
Dangerous words.
They are dangerous words, but also brave words.
Okay, what's next in the pipeline for you? Well, you're working on a book. Can you tell us about it and other upcoming projects?
I can't tell you too much about it, Sandra. Secret. It has murder.
Gusto mo yan?
It has murder.
Yun ang
And
gusto
it will
ko.
come out, I think, in 2016 if I behave myself.
That's what I'm in the house.
Yeah.
Are you working on another book at the same time, or finishing this one first?
Well, I usually, I write the big YA book that is hard in the morning, and then I usually have some kind of little side project, like something for younger readers that I work on when I'm tired. Not that it's easier to write exactly, but they are shorter and a little lighter and funnier. There's not so much bleeding onto the page.
The one you're writing is more middle grade.
Yeah. But I have the YA I have a draft of the YA, so
A standalone.
yeah, a standalone.
Wow.
Para sa'yo.
It's a standalone. It has murder. It has a complicated narrative structure, and it has it is not in high school.
Oh, di ba?
Well, We Were Liars has been optioned for a movie adaptation by Imperative Entertainment. Given the chance, who would you pick as Kato's got Johnny and Mira?
Instead of really answering, I'm going to explain to you about the movie deal. So Imperative Entertainment is a movie company, and they didn't option the book, they bought it, which means they own it pretty much forever. So option means that I get it back after a while. If they don't make a movie, I'm not getting it back. But the good side of that means that they have invested in it, and they are excited, and they have commissioned a screenplay, and there's a draft. The screenplay is a draft, and it's going back for some rewrites. And interestingly, the producers of this movie are the people who produced all the Farrelly Brothers movies. So they made, something about Mary and Dumb and Dumber, and yes, and then they bought We Were Liars. So what will they make? I do not know.
Is there any advice you'd like to give to aspiring writers in the audience?
I give you this answer. I write on a regular schedule, and one of my novels is usually about 60,000 words. If you write an email to a friend, and I know you guys are just doing your Instagram or Twitter. But let's just imagine you have a friend that you haven't seen in a while and you actually want to write a whole email. And you just type out the email and you're talking about your day or your week or whatever annoying thing your parents did or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever. And chatty, chat, 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 chat. You have written 250 words, I promise you. You write 2 of those emails, maximum it takes you an hour. Right? It's not taking you that long. It's not even taking you an hour. So let's say you write 500 words in an hour. If you do that every day for 5 days and take the weekend off, you've got 2,500 words. In a month, you have 10,000 words. In 6 months, you have a novel. Yeah. So just write those 500 words every day. Just write them. Just write them, and then you'll have a novel, and then you have to rewrite it, you know, maybe 700 times. But 700? No, yes, really. But that first draft is the hardest thing, and it's just 500 words a day. Just do it.